Last week, I was out on a 62-year-old head coach. This week, I'm all in. Mike McCarthy is the guy for Pittsburgh. He's a Pittsburgher coming back to his city. They got a team and a roster that could absolutely be playoff ready and Super Bowl contenders next year. I'm getting excited for the Steelers.
Oh, I could not be any more in the opposite direction. This should be fun to say the least. We couldn't disagree more on this.
Welcome back to an emergency pod of Out of Tahn Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. Just a reminder, me and Justin have been lifelong friends. We no longer live in Pittsburgh anymore. That's the out of town part. But we're always talking about Pittsburgh sports. Today, there's nothing else to talk about other than the Mike McCarthy coming back home to lead the charge for number 7 Super Bowl for the Steelers. It's happening. Come on, get excited.
Yeah, get excited. I don't I'm getting the sense that we're going to have very, very opposite takes, which is certainly fine, but I was at a loss for words when the hire came, and I must have checked my phone 7, 8 times before I actually believed the news. It's also just incredible. A week after we started our pod talking about Mike McCarthy, and here we are, 8 days later, talking about him. We're going to disagree on this, which should be fun. Again, we'll get it. There's a bunch of angles to this. I'm shocked. I'm shocked from a stands, perspective about the actual hire. I've got a lot to say about ownership and all the concerns that I kind of touched on and we've talked about the last two pods, but I'm blown away. I really when we brought him up, I thought, oh, they're not even gonna. We obviously talked to him before they were even said to be interviewing him. This is a completely different direction than I thought they were gonna go. Obviously, as we talked about before, certainly not their MO. And I just, like we talked about on the last pod, I don't think the hire fits the situation. I'm very concerned about what this says about what they think about the roster. Maybe we disagree on the roster and we didn't even know about it based on some of the things we've been talking about. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with McCarthy himself, or do you want to start with?
Yeah, I want to go with McCarthy. I'm going to make the case for why Mike
Okay,
McCarthy is a great hire for Pittsburgh, and then you can come back with whatever you want to come back with. But
okay,
let's
all
go
right.
back through it because I think the first words you said on this podcast kind of hold true in that Mike McCarthy just doesn't have a good publicist. I feel like the backward-looking view on Mike McCarthy is jaded. He did get fired from 2 jobs, so that kind of adds to that jadedness. But let's look back through the record. So Mike McCarthy record in Green Bay, Super Bowl winning coach. You can see he only had 2 losing seasons the whole time he was there, including the last season. He went 7-9, so that was kind of when he went out. But the year before
Mhm.
that, he lost in the NFC Championship game. The year before that, lost in the division round. The year before that, they lost in the NFC Championship game. So at the same time, he had that 1 year at the end that they're like, okay, it's time to go. Kind of things getting stale. Same story we just had in Pittsburgh, right? But he's been a high quality head coach. 3 times his offense finished first in the NFL in points per game. And then flip it over to Dallas. So when you look at Dallas for Mike McCarthy, again, 5 years there. Hindsight, McCarthy's terrible. Mostly around the lack of playoff success in Dallas is kind of the recency there. But same thing. He had 3 years in which he had a healthy Dak Prescott for the whole season. Each of those 3 years, he won 12 games. 2 of those 3 years, he was the number one in the NFL in points per game. And then the other year, he's fourth. So he's top 5 in all of the 3 years where he actually had a healthy quarterback. So play that forward with the Steelers. If the Steelers they have already had Mike McCarthy. If they keep Aaron Rodgers, so I think we haven't gotten into the NFL draft yet, but the NFL draft is not good for quarterbacks. You're not going to find that guy this year. And from a free agency standpoint or kind of a turnover retread standpoint, and then the quarterback world, what do you think of a Kyler, Malik? It's bleak when it comes to the quarterback. So bring Aaron Rodgers back. Finally get a wide receiver too. Omar's finally got the options now. That could be through the draft. It could be a Brandon Ayuk, let's say, in this scenario. last checkbox is just to win that Super Bowl. I feel like we haven't gotten into the full roster yet, but that's really what they were missing was just someone on the offensive side. It's kind of a strong wide receiver two for DK. They can fill that now. It'll be their number one piece if Aaron Rodgers comes back. So I'm excited. Mike McCarthy, lock it in, division winner for the Steelers. We'll see about the Super Bowl.
So yeah, well, I don't want to dive. I have a lot more thoughts, like I said before, on the front office and Rooney and what just how I feel like they're in a different world from reality here. But I don't disagree with some of the points he made. It's like talking to a mirror based on some things I was saying last week, about Tomlin versus McCarthy. But that's exactly why I don't think this is at all the direction they should have gone in. He is a different version of Tomlin, which is, to your point, to all the points you just made, it's not the worst thing. They could have made worse hires here. This is just it's the wrong direction in general. So stats you mentioned, it is weird how similar you throw in Harbaugh, how similar McCarthy, Tomlin, Harbaugh. McCarthy and Harbaugh they were within .01 winning percentage during the regular season, within one game in the playoffs, both won one Super Bowl. You throw Sean Payton into this group, they're all the same statistics, which is an argument for, that you're making. They just hired a guy that you bring in when you're a competing team and you want to keep the ship going, not we're looking to build for the long run. And that's what they should be doing. We've talked about that. We haven't dove super deep into that. We'll go into the roster and we'll certainly have plenty of time to go into the roster. I do agree. Some of the things you said about the roster, you throw a wide receiver two on the offense looks different all of a sudden. My thing is, and this is where it stops and it starts with McCarthy, is this roster, that we might disagree on this. This roster is closer to the bottom of the AFC and the Raiders than it is the top of the AFC. There's just the talent is, and let's exclude the quarterback. We'll just take the quarterback out of the equation, which you can't, but we will, just for argument's sake. They are closer to the Raiders talent-wise on offense than they are, name the team basically left, all those teams. You can't tell me, you can't go player for player and tell me that the talent is there. We are just living in, we'll get into the Rooneys in a second here, but I just think they're living in a fantasy land right now. Like the amount of things that had to go right this year, and the amount of things that Burrow and Lamar both getting hurt, the amount of things that had to line up and have had to line up the last couple years, including adding a seventh playoff team, which is the reason they've made the playoffs a few of these years. It's just not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable before. It isn't going to be sustainable now. Do I hate them going offense? No, we talked about it before. Like, I think you need to if you have the quarterback, maybe this hire makes a little bit more sense. McCarthy, I do believe, and this is another thing, this is an argument for you. I do believe McCarthy is viewed differently in the actual NFL than he is to fans. It's similar to like an argument we might have about Justin Fields, or we did have a year ago. Justin Fields was viewed very differently in the NFL than he was to the fantasy community, than he was to fans. There's a reason people were, on ESPN's leading their A block with, is Justin Fields going to go for a first round pick? And fans are like, well, maybe we could get him for a second. And then reality sets in, and you look at the turnovers, you look at things like that. So I think this is a similar argument, being made for McCarthy. I would make for McCarthy in that I think he is viewed better than people think. It's just the same thing we talked about before. Like, I don't want to say age because that's not necessarily fair, but what's the long-term picture here? Like, I'll make an argument later, depending on how this goes, for maybe there's one weird way if they thread a needle with some of the other hires, this makes sense. I'm just not seeing it. I don't see it. It just doesn't. There's a lot of angles to this. From the coach himself, I just think it's a swing and a miss. I couldn't be any more disappointed, and I don't think he's a bad coach. I just don't get it. I don't see where what they're going for with this. I don't get it from a roster management perspective. I want you to convince, and you did a good, job convincing me there. I need someone to talk me off the ledge with this hire. It's just, I'm not seeing it. I'm trying. I've looked at, I've been looking at a lot of the arguments for online. I'm just not seeing it. So
I feel like one thing that people point out with Mike McCarthy, And I feel like one of the things outside of just kind of what people would thought of his career is his age and the 62 aspect. People are thinking, hey, when you're a Steelers coach, you're going to be hired, you're going to be there for another 15 years. That shouldn't be the expectation, and really just shouldn't happen, like in general, for franchises to have that for 15 years. So having a Mike McCarthy for a 5 to 6 year stretch, when you think of a head coach, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And move on and kind of make the next hire after that. Actually groom a head coach and things of that nature. So I feel like you can't say, hey, I'm going to lock in and be with, one coach for the next 15 years. Let's not hire anyone over 45 type of aspect.
I will agree with it because I don't think just because what worked in the past isn't necessarily, what you have to do. That's what, and like I said before, I was worried about Rooney doing what he thought he was supposed to do. But I think this is kind of that. I think this is kind of him going, I think he's just playing it safe, and that's kind of been the knock on him from a lot of people is him just going, what do I think I should do? And that's what worries me a little bit. I do agree with just because it worked in the past that you hired a certain way doesn't mean you hire that way just because of that. But of all the times you look at when they went with Chuck Noll and they hired a young guy, it made sense. They were not what they were or became in the 70s. When they went with Cowher, another time where they were rebuilding, clearly, a lot of the players were already off the team and they were aging at that point. You went with a young guy. You could have make the argument the one time they should have gone with like a Mike McCarthy type hire was when they hired Tomlin. Honestly, they were 2 years removed from a Super Bowl. It would have made sense, and everyone, including Russ Grimm himself, thought they were going with the Russ Grimm hire. At that point, every single writer probably had their Russ Grimm's hired article ready to go, and and out of nowhere it became Tomlin. But this time again, this is probably pretty similar to Cowher and that hire in that time period. But I just think of all times where it makes sense to go young and start over. This is the time. And again, maybe it is. We're just seeing the rosters a little differently than the front office. Again, I think this roster, on offense specifically, is way closer to the bottom of the AFC than it is the top.
Let's talk through that just for 1 second, and then we can kind of wrap up. This is an emergency pod, so we're going to make it a little shorter than normal. But when you think of that Steelers offense, and you kind of think of it position by position, what are we talking about for gaps for next year? On the offensive line, you got a left guard, say Amalu's a free agent, so they could potentially bring him back. But, you're talking a left guard. That's not a make or break for you. Like we talked about on the last pod, I love the right side of that line. And I think Broderick Jones is better than Dylan Cook kind of coming back too. So I feel like that's the line's there. Tight end is tight end. Tight ends with Freiermuth, I think was underused with Arthur Smith. I think it'll be different with a different coach. Darnell Washington's a different beast. DK at wide receiver, you're missing depth behind DK. So you need at least two more guys behind DK. And then I think you can win with your running back room. I think a Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Warren, and then hope for a little bit more with a Caleb Johnson with a new coaching staff next year, and just roll the dice on the running back room. So I don't think they're that far off when it thinks of the talent. I think it's really just in the receiver room that's most glaring.
The way you phrase the question, I would agree with what you're saying, but I would counter that and say almost every player on this roster, with the exception of like the wide receiver after DK, which we definitely agree on, you could say it's almost like you say you can win with insert every single player in the offense and that if is always if you've got other things around them. I just don't see high-end talent at any of these positions. I think Frazier could be an all-pro center. I'll agree with you there. I like a lot of these guys. They're just role players. They're a guy, if you put them next to a great player on the line, maybe, then, the line all of a sudden looks great. It's just there's no difference makers. I think DK is the closest to that. I just, to me, he's a number one with a good quarterback, or he's a number one when there's complementary players around him. Same the running backs, again, same deal there. You could win with them if you have other talent at receiver and like difference makers. It's difference makers is really what it comes down to for me.
I think the running backs are difference makers. The running backs are difference makers to me. Look at the 4 teams left right now in the NFL playoffs. Who has a legitimate, hands down, better running back room than the Steelers?
Well, again, and that's the same thing. That's what I would agree with you. But they have either the quarterback or the Broncos have one of the best lines in the NFL. they're players that I'm not saying you need to go out, and I wouldn't spend on running back. That's the last thing I would spend. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
But again, and running back's different. We agree on running back in general, especially with their comments last week. I think we agree on the position. It's just there's just no difference maker on the offense. I think DK's close. I just don't think you're not going to win games solely because of him. They need someone that you can that can win a game, or I just don't see it on the offense. Again, defense is a little different. I'm worried they're trending the wrong direction because of the age at a couple of positions, but I want to see a difference maker. I do agree the offense could look different with someone beyond DK at receiver. So I just don't see a difference maker.
Yeah. Well, they got 12 picks this year too, so they got money
That's
and
true.
12 picks.
Yes, and they'll move around with those picks.
I feel like if you can sign, a Jacoby Myers free agent, and then draft a wide receiver in the first round, like a Lemon, then Malachi Lemon. Like
Daniel
that,
Jeremiah was quoted today as saying 10 of his top 50 players at this point. That'll change, obviously, but 10 of his top 50 players are receivers. You could even double up. You could do like the Texans did last year.
Yeah, double up on receiver.
Yeah.
They got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. And then even 2 more in the 4th round. Thank you, Justin Fields, who bashed earlier, for that pick. But
yeah,
at the same time, like they're going to have, that's why I'm saying, like, they have a pretty solid roster right now. They're not losing anybody you're worried about. And they have a lot of picks and money to fill in the gaps that they need to. When you think of the secondary and you think of the receiver room.
It's just, to me, and we don't disagree. I would agree. There are certain ways this could break if they hit on some of these picks, and really they continue doing what they've done. They've filled some holes, and they've got some players I think they could build off of for sure. But it's just, I just don't see the difference makers. I don't think you want to depend on rookies to be difference makers like at this level personally. But to me, like when I look at this roster, I look at what I think is, if you told me to make a more right in the middle of the league roster, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could actually do it and be like, this is a realistic roster. If you're better than the Steelers, you're probably pretty good. You're a playoff team. If you're not better than the Steelers, you're not a playoff team. It's actually kind of impressive how right in the middle they actually are. And it's kind of across the board. My bigger question with all this, and like I hinted at it before, was definitely the front office. Like, are they seeing, and maybe not Omar Khan, is Rooney seeing, like, is he looking at this completely different? His comments last week of we always want to be competing. I was definitely going to bring Tomlin back. I mean, we were going to go at it again. Like, I'm worried about it. You talked about bringing Rodgers back. Man, I just don't see a path there to anything better than Groundhog Day again. Ceilings 9, maybe 10 wins again. That's just what I see with this roster personally.
Yeah. So we're kind of at around 20 minutes now, so we can wrap it up. But my kind of final thoughts, and we'll have a full pod here later this week on our normal Wednesday slot. But my final thoughts, really, at the end of the day, is I'm excited about Mike McCarthy. I'm a Mike McCarthy enthusiast, and at the end of the day, you should be too. Everyone else, I think, would be excited if they would have hired a Chris Shula. And that's really, and I said it last week, I was excited about the last name, but that's really why people were excited about Chris Shula. Otherwise, he's just Sean McVay's roommate who kind of rode his coattails to a defensive coordinator job anyway. So yeah. The other coaches in this cycle weren't slam dunk coaches by any means either. Mike McCarthy has been there, done that. He is a good coach, and he will be a good coach in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I will say, I think there's a lot more guesswork, especially from fans, let alone the teams. We know there's it's guessing from the teams when it comes to head coaches. Like we think we know, this is a good hire, it's a bad hire. There's a lot of, I don't want to say luck, but there's a lot of variance. There's a lot of guesswork when it comes to this. So that I'll meet you halfway, I guess, when it comes to that.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
All right, see you later.